Okay, good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. I want to make this a little bit different than maybe some of the other presentations this morning and make it a little bit more interactive. I am a person that doesn't enjoy being spoken to. I love talking to people, but being talked at is usually pretty annoying. So I'm going to do my best to engage with you guys this morning, and we can have a kind of a meaningful conversation. I was asked by Simon and the crew to speak on early intervention specific to this conference, and you might ask yourself, what the heck does early intervention have to do with marketing? So hopefully I can bridge that gap with you guys in the next 15, 20 minutes, and then we can answer some questions together. But by a show of hands, how many people in this room know someone or have a family member that's been impacted by cancer? Okay. Did you guys see how many? Raise your hands again. Okay. Take a look around the room. Okay. So the next question I have for you, because I'm kind of on the other side of the old geezer spectrum here, is why are you here? Right? Why do you do what you do? And what gets you up in the morning? And it can't just be a paycheck. I was talking to a few people this morning, including this young man right here who's a student, and a couple of other students are here, and they're exploring our industry. And one of the questions was, why do you do what you do? You know, it's easy for a physician to say, I do what I do because I like to heal people. And as a marketer, what would you say? You're working in the industry, right? So the question is, why do you do what you do? And I would submit to you this morning that we all sort of started on this journey because we actually care about the patient. Many of us went to medical school. Some of us are PharmDs. I know many of my colleagues are PharmDs. My colleague Mike, who's here in the audience this morning, and others have been various types of clinicians and then have migrated over to the commercial side of the business, so to speak, as we call it, over time. But we all started with this vision of trying to do something to impact patients' lives, right? That's why we do what we do. And when we lose sight of that, that's when bad decisions get made and people get hurt. So we've got to stay focused on making sure that we are doing the right thing all the time for the patient. Okay. Today's going to be a little bit of a personal conversation for me, and I'll share some personal family stories with you guys and just be very open kimono with some of the stuff that we've encountered as a family. And hopefully you can take that and learn from it and talk to your teams about it, and hopefully it helps some other people. But speed to therapy for me is, I think, one of the most important things I've seen in healthcare, particular to marketers, because we know that speed to therapy is really what drives outcomes. Today I'm going to talk about cancer. It's why I had you raise your hands. But it's the same in every disease, right? Alzheimer's, speed to therapy, you can delay the dementia set and all of those pieces. And we could go through the patient journeys and we could talk about the different comorbidities associated with all of these things. But today we're going to focus on breast cancer. Specifically, we're going to focus on triple negative breast cancer. So what does early intervention do? Okay, early intervention, it can basically slow or eliminate the patient's progress on the disease, at least for a period of time. And the example that I've got today, as I said, is going to be triple negative breast cancer related. Okay, what are some of the barriers to early intervention that we all know about? It's all of these things that you guys deal with on a daily basis. I saw Derek Fetzer here a couple minutes ago. I don't know if he's in the room now, but Derek and I did work together at market access for J&J. I saw Tom Lennox's kid here, and Ryan, and he's following in his dad's footsteps. We were at BMS together, back working on market access stuff when market access was an afterthought. There's a couple of you who are probably old enough to remember this, but back in the early days of drug commercialization, we didn't even talk about market access when we were commercializing drugs, right? It was all about building the market, launching the drug, understanding the sales, finding the physicians, all of that stuff was done. And then at the last minute, someone would raise their hand. Did anybody call the market access guy or gal? And everybody would be like, oh my gosh, we got to get the guy in the room. And so they would come in the room and then all of a sudden would say, guys, your launch plan is great, except we can't get it reimbursed. And then we would spend the next 2 quarters trying to figure out how to get it reimbursed, right? So that's the way that things were. Now, when a launch plan is happening, guess who's sitting at the table? The market access team. right? And there's an omni-channel team, there's a digital team, there's a data team, and it looks totally different than it did 26 years ago when I started doing this. It's just a completely different industry, right? And it's largely because of these things that we know that are problematic for us in the industry. Fragmented care, shorter doctor visits because insurance companies want to see how many people they can churn through the hamster wheel and without, impacting the quality of care. And I would argue they don't actually care about the quality of care. Sorry, payers, if you're in here, but that's just the reality of it, right? Diagnostic costs are really going through the roof. We have rural access gaps. How many of you have heard of the term healthcare deserts in our country? Anybody heard of that? Okay. It's the majority of our country, right? We've got MSAs that are pretty populated around New York and Chicago and some places in California, maybe out in Colorado, but the vast majority of our country are healthcare deserts, right? Which means people are difficult to reach, and it's difficult for us to be able to help them. It's difficult for them to be able to get diagnosis. So where does technology come in? I want to share with you guys a real personal story. This is about myself. So in 2011, I was in New York having dinner with some Pfizer colleagues, and we went to a steakhouse. I can't even remember which steakhouse it was. But I was sitting there having steak, and the head of commercial operations, guy from Germany, wanted me to try this specific German steak that he was just crazy about. And so anyway, I got it, and we're sitting there chatting, and as I'm eating the steak, I bit my tongue. And it hurt like crazy. You bite your tongue probably 20 times a year, 30 times a year, right? By accident, it always goes away, it heals, no issues, and you kind of move on, right? So a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, and I still have this like imprint on my tongue, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? So I decided to go in to see my dentist. My dentist said, I'm not sure, you should go over to the oral surgeon and just have it biopsied and see what's going on. And it just looked like a bite mark on my tongue that just wasn't healing. That was in August of 2011, so 30 days later, okay? August of 2011, 2 weeks later, I found myself at Mass Eye and Ear, which is, it's a division of Massachusetts General Hospital, and I had a cancer diagnosis. Okay, I had a tumor that was on the base of my tongue, and it was stage 1, so it wasn't metastatic disease, although at that point we didn't really know. And very quickly, I was taken by the head of oncology, who thankfully was a personal friend, Derek Lynn, and brought immediately into surgery, and the tumor was resected, removed 25% of the back of my tongue, which your tongue regenerates. I don't know if you knew that, might be TMI, but anyway, it does. Don't cut it off, though, just in case. If you were thinking about it, don't do it. And then I had my lymph nodes removed on the left side of my neck because metastatic disease lingually is bidirectional, so you always stay on one half of your body, and then it progresses to lung cancer and so forth. So anyway, you get on this journey, right? So now that's just the start of it. When resection happens and you have surgery, you have a tumor removed, now you're on the pipeline journey, you're on the conveyor belt, and you keep going back and back. So I had the distinct privilege of getting that immediate radiation going out, and then every week I would go back in for more radiation, more testing, more CT scanning, and then I graduated from weeks to months, months to quarters, quarters to half a year, and so on and so forth. And now we're in 2026, and I'm so grateful and so blessed to be here that I wanted to be able to share that story, that it's been since 2012 that I've been cancer-free, which has been a huge blessing in my life, okay? Thanks. I had, and we have no family history of cancer, okay? I'm not a smoker. I don't drink alcohol, no HPV. I jog 3 times a week, eat pretty healthy, although I'm an old geezer, so I could stand to lose a few lbs, but back then I was pretty lean and mean. And, when I went in, I would have probably been the last person you would have expected to have any type of lingual cancer at all. And there I was, okay? And so part of what we do as marketers and as people that are working in this industry, it goes way beyond putting ads in front of people, okay? If all you want to do is put ads in front of people programmatically, I can give you 5 other places where you're going to make a lot more money and have a better quality of life because you're going to work less hours. But if you're interested in actually helping people, you're in the right spot, okay? And so what are some things that we can do? Well, here are some things that we can do, okay? we can get over some of these structural barriers, all right? And this is why I wanted to mention triple-negative breast cancer, because I think it's just the absolute cleanest way for you guys to be able to see technology and people and everything interacting in this ecosystem in a really mapped out way. And you'll have access to these slides, and if you've got questions, you can reach out to me, and you can reach out to my colleagues that are going to be here anyway. But here's the situation, okay? Triple-negative breast cancer, for those of you who aren't aware, is the worst form of breast cancer, okay? It requires 3 different diagnostic tests, all 3 of which are performed in different locations by different people. They all take time, and time is the big enemy, sorry. Time is the big enemy, and that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit as far as using technology in diagnosing these patients, okay? HCPs also have a very limited ability to understand what's going on with the patient beyond the normal testing that you guys are aware of, HER2 positive, negative, stuff that we've been dealing with for years, okay? This is more novel, and right now there are only 2 drugs that are approved for it, and there is no diagnostic code singular for this specific disease. Everybody in here know what an ICD-10 code is? Raise your hand if you do. Okay. How many of you rely on ICD-10 codes for your marketing efforts? Many of you, right? There's no code for this disease, okay? And so you're in this weird vacuum of trying to help oncologists and PCPs, because they're working together in this instance, and OBGYNs work together, and these are people that are not used to working together. Okay? And so, you know, here's a couple ways in which it fell short. So overly broad NPI lists, right? We would take these in pharma, large NPI lists, find the high deciled physicians, and again, we're still doing this, which drives me crazy, but it's like we decile out these physicians, we find the high prescribers, and then the false assumption is, if I just continue to market as heavily as possible to the high prescribers, they're gonna prescribe more. What's the false narrative there, guys? In order for a physician to prescribe more, they have to have more what? Patients. What if they don't have any patients? So now you're throwing all your money at these physicians that actually can't write anymore. Where do you think those patients might be? They might be in some of those healthcare deserts we talked about, okay? And because there are only roughly 4,000 total triple-negative breast cancer patients in the United States, that's kind of like a needle in a haystack scenario, isn't it? Right? So very, very tough. Only 10 to 15% of those patients, no trigger, like I said, difficult to locate. So here's what we did, okay, with the first brand that launched, and I'm going to leave this up and we'll circulate it again so you guys can see it, because I think it was powerful what we did, and we did this in collaboration with another manufacturer, which was really a blessing. So first thing we did was we said, we can't start with the doctors. The doctors actually don't know where these patients are, and we're running out of time. So we've got to start with the patients. All right, that was the first thing. Don't start with the doctors, start with the patients. Find every single patient that is a triple-negative breast cancer patient. Well, that's difficult because we don't have ICD-10 codes. Okay, what's the next thing we're going to look for? We're going to start looking for those diagnostic test orders. And we'll find the orders, and then we'll use the real-world data like Gunjan was talking about. We'll feed it into our machine learning platform, and our AI will predict whatever is missing. So we could see maybe 2 of the 3 or 1 of the 3 and maybe other comorbidities, and the AI would fill in the gap. And the minute we filled in that gap, we looked at geolocation of where that individual token was, because these are hyper-compliant situations, right? We're not breaking HIPAA envelope issues here. And we're going to see who the treating physicians are for that specific patient. And once we see the treating physicians for that patient, we're going to immediately activate information to those physicians and say, you likely have a patient in your current treatment pool that is a triple-negative breast cancer patient. And we would furnish that information to that oncologist. And that would drive a conversation to happen between the oncologist, the OBGYN, and the PCP. It would facilitate dialogue proactively. Okay, and that's the engage component to it. And then obviously from that level of precision, we had really good conversion. And you know, one of the things that we talk about inside of OptimizeRx continually is we only want to have digital conversations that convert. We don't want to blast everybody with untargeted messages, annoy the crap out of everybody. Physicians just get exhausted of it, guys, they do. prescribers don't want more marketing. They want information that they can take an action on, and they want it to be able to make an impact on their patient's life. And so by making sure that we're good stewards over that data and we're only delivering data with integrity, they begin to trust it, and they know, hey, when I get this message from OPRX, Mike Palladino, I know I can trust it. If I get the 500th email of the week from, fill in the platform XYZ, and it's not relevant to the patient pool, it might not even be relevant for my specialty, that's just going to annoy me to death, and I'm going to opt out if I can, as fast as I can. Okay, so that's the way that we built the technology. So what was the outcome? Okay, we saw a 28% increase in patient starts. All right, that is a huge increase, and this is in year 1, by the way. So this wasn't that we had to launch this program and wait 36 months. No, year 1, it was a 28% increase in patient starts. 8 to 9 month improvement in time to start to therapy. Okay. The average life expectancy for a stage 4 metastatic triple-negative breast cancer patient is 15 months post-diagnosis. So giving these people another, 8 to 9 month improvement is a pretty big deal. Okay, and I'm not here to take credit for that. I think the manufacturer deserves all of the credit for commercializing incredible therapy. But boy, if you're here because you are purpose-driven in what you do for work, it feels pretty good to look at numbers like that and say, we helped people. We made a difference, okay? Really powerful. It's not just about HCPs, by the way. I'm just giving you an example of how we inform the HCPs using our technology to mobilize doctors and enable that digital conversation to happen. But it also works with patients. And how many of you are working on the direct-to-consumer side in here? I know we have the Pulse Point guys outside, so many of you, right? There's definitely now a convergence of these two modalities, isn't there? It's the HCP team and the DTC team now need to work together, right? Because you're all trying to find the same audiences of patients and physicians to talk to. And the more you can synergize between those two disciplines, the better the outcomes will be for your doctors and your patients. So it's super important that you talk together. Here's what we deal with on the DTC side, right? Significantly underdiagnosed patients. Everybody knows that. You're dealing with it every single day. HCPs are misattributing symptoms, right? They're missing stuff. They're running 1,000,000 miles an hour to try to see as many patients as they can, so they don't have Aetna calling them and screaming that they're not seeing enough hamsters on the wheel. And then patients are overlooking disease indicators, right? We all do that. And we do it under the guise of, I'm fine, I don't need to go see the doctor, I know that I'm bleeding someplace or my eyeball's falling out or whatever, but my dad was a Vietnam vet. He was a Green Beret during Vietnam, and so we grew up in a very specific way. And so it was never appropriate to complain or go to the doctor or do anything but get up, make your bed at 5 a.m. and get out the door and do a couple laps around the property before you got on the school bus. So that was just how we were raised. Early recognition treatment slowed progression, right? And then other demographic TV channel choices and stuff, we're starting to see the changes in that, aren't we? And we know, I'm not here to talk to you about the legislation, but all of you are, I'm sure, laser focused on what's going on with the legislative changes, linear television, CTV, ATV, First Amendment rights, all of those things, okay? So it's hyper-local, right? That's the way we think about our technology, and that's the way we encourage our partners to operate also. It's hyper-local. 2 times faster at scheduling visits when we apply this to DTC, 11% increase in cardiologist visits overall. Cardiology is probably our largest therapeutic area on the DTC side right now, I would say. And then, 7% increase in PCP visits. And while these are, low double-digit numbers, they're pretty meaningful. If you're a DTC marketer, those are good numbers, okay? So marketers cannot control everything, okay? We can't solve the world's problems. We're not here as neurosurgeons looking to resect tumors from people's frontal cortexes. It's not what we're doing. But we do have a really important role in the ecosystem of healthcare, and more importantly, we have an important opportunity to use our time and our company's time to help these patients that are really in desperate need of getting help. And we can do that with urgency, precision, relevance, and we can leverage all of the wonderful technology assets and data assets that have been democratized for our use. And that is something that 26 years ago, and many of you I think are at my age in here, we didn't have that. right? And so it's a real privilege to have a real-world data asset like Gunjan was talking about, with longitudinal patient-level claims data integrated with lab data and EHR data and all kinds of stuff, because you can start to interrogate it and find patterns, find patients, and do different things. That's not the only data. There are plenty of other data sets, but I thought her example was really actually wonderful. So my invitation to you guys is just to think about, why are you here? And to request, let's work together as an industry to try to do the best that we can to benefit patients. There are plenty of people. I was blessed and very fortunate to be able to find my situation out early and have access to incredible care in Boston, where I live. Many people are not that fortunate, and my view is we have a responsibility, because we're blessed to be able to work in this industry. We have a responsibility to make sure that we do our best to bless other people's lives. Thanks, guys.
Steve, excuse me. We've got time for a couple of questions before our next session, if anybody wants to hop in and chime in with anything. That was obviously
happy to answer race car questions, too, if you have race car questions.
I just realized the size of this room. Right.
Nothing about the Yankees, though, please.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I think you said something really important on focusing on things that convert because of that speed to therapy. I find that a lot of folks in marketing focus on that awareness phase of the funnel because it's easy, it's cheap, to your point. Let's just throw out banners, let's send emails. What are your thoughts on awareness, and if awareness is actually a thing?
It's a great question, and thank you for the question. How many people in this room are old enough to have worked, and I'm sorry I keep coming back to the age, but we've got new students, and we've got some of us who have been here for 25, 30 years. How many people have built an ATU in this room? Okay. What does ATU stand for?
Awareness trial usage.
Awareness trial usage. Okay. All three of those things are really important, right? If we don't understand the awareness component, trial and usage never happens. But to your point, too many people spend a lot of time and money on the awareness component, and they forget about the trial and usage. And ultimately, what we're trying to do is drive trial and drive usage. That's the job of awareness, right? So the more precise that you can get your awareness, the higher the probability that you will drive trial and you will drive usage. How many people in here look at persistence and compliance charts all the time? All right, couple hands raised, couple data guys in here. Those are incredibly difficult to look at, right? Because you might get a first fill, although 70% of prescriptions the first time are not filled in the United States. I think you probably know that stat. It takes a second attempt to get it done. But even the average compliance in the US, anybody know what that is? When it's not an infusion mandated. Anybody know? Stats? No stats? It's roughly 40%. 40% of patients stay on therapy a second and third time. Okay? So that 60% is what we call therapy abandonment. And that's why the gentleman over here works on persistence and compliance like he does, because we spend so much money creating awareness to get that initial trial as manufacturers. All of that is, get me that first script, get me the first script. Okay, you're on, we've got you the first NBRX. They're in there. Okay, now 3 weeks later, they're off. You wasted every dime of that. Okay, so great question. Yeah, other questions?
Any more for Steve before we hop into the next panel? Yes.
So I think what you said about intervention is really interesting for a rare disease because, like you said, so many patients aren't aware. So if you are reaching out to doctors at that time, collecting all the data, how are you striking that balance of helpfulness versus creepiness?
Yeah, it's a really fine line is the answer to that. It's a really fine line, and what we've seen is that, at least I can speak for OptimizeRx, the more precision we can provide, the happier the physician is. And we're not tracking the physician, and we talked about a little bit in Gunjan's presentation and a couple of other presentations about social footprint of physicians and patients and tracking and all those things. We try really hard not to use some of those components when we're dealing with this level of specificity, because it does feel like Amazon is invading your healthcare environment, right? All of a sudden you're talking with your spouse about inserts in your shoes, and the next thing you know, they're all over the place because your iPhone heard about it, right? So we try to evitate that in our approach, but it's avoiding that, but making sure you're bringing precision information to the front of the line. And it's as important for the patient to hear about it as it is for the consumer, for the physician. And if the patient is feeling any types of symptoms, you've got to help the patient understand what those symptoms are and try to at least drive them to have the conversation with the doctor. At no point are we trying to get the patient to have their own, to go in and say, I want to be on therapy XYZ. That's not what we're trying to do. But we're trying there to get the patient to go in and have the conversation with their healthcare provider so that they can address the issues that they're undergoing. Okay, great question. I think we all wrestle with that, so it's a really good one. Others? Got one more, Simon.
Any more?
Over here.
Oh, over there, sorry.
I just want to say I really love the purpose-driven sort of messaging of your talk right here, and I think the triple-negative breast cancer example is really emblematic of that. I was curious how you would approach, or if your strategy how your strategy changes for less rare disease, something where it's a much more crowded space, there's a much higher patient population, and even the stakes are a little bit lower, changing your strategy, but still maintain that purpose-driven messaging.
Yeah, I mean, we can use the GLP-1s as probably an example because it's the largest population in our country, right? 70% of Americans. So it's the same methodology, right? Is understanding where patients are, what they need, reading the data that's in their chart, reading the data that comes in the claims and their profile generally, and then making sure that you're engaging with the physician. And there's enough differentiation inside those labels that you know which therapy would be better for which specific indication and comorbid profile. But that's the way that we do it. Yeah. Still always data-driven, and that's what I would, if there's one thing you walk away from today, be a data-driven marketer. Do not be a spray-and-pray marketer, because your job will be very short-lived. Okay? All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Cheers, man. Excellent. Thank you, Shannon.
All right. Okay, so we're gonna. That was a thank you very much for you all for the questions and engagement there. So we're gonna hop right into our first panel of the day now. I'm gonna keep things very brief. In fact, I'd like to invite Eric Duran, who's team lead in the client and partnership side of things with PulsePoint.